It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. The Mark Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Mark is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Mark Scaringi.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. Welcome to my listeners here on WHP 580 AM and iHeartRadio. If you'd like to listen to some prior podcasts of the show or check out some of my columns on Penn Live and the other publications, or if you'd like to check out some great merchandise, you can take a look at the markscaringishow.com website. And we'll talk about just about the biggest political and legal issue of the day, and that is the impeachment of President Donald J. Trump. We'll start by examining the whistleblower complaint, and then we'll talk about the actual impeachment process that is underway in the House of Representatives. First, the whistleblower complaint. I tortured myself by sitting down and reading through this multiple-page document that was obviously written by attorneys who are well-versed in the law and well-versed in national security and intelligence law. So we'll kind of parse through that, and I'll give you my thoughts about the complaint. Now, of course, you can probably imagine where I'm coming from, based if you're a listener of the show. A review of this whistleblower complaint, in my opinion, reveals it's the latest in a series of hoaxes designed by Democrats and their sympathizers in the intelligence community, and I say that in quotes, quote, intelligence community, end quote, to impeach a duly elected president who has really done nothing wrong, let alone commit a high crime or misdemeanor, which is required in order to impeach a sitting president. Now, similar to United States Representative Adam Schiff's fake parody of the now famous telephone call between President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, the whistleblower complaint is a fraud. Let's take the very first sentence of the complaint. That proves the point. It states, in quote, in the course of my official duties, I have received information from multiple U.S. government officials that Trump is using the power of his office to solicit interference from a foreign country in the 2020 U.S. election, end quote. Yet the whistleblower was not involved in any of the matters described in the complaint. Notably, he was not in on Trump's call with Zelensky, which serves the basis of his complaint. None of what appears in the whistleblower complaint was obtained in the course of his official duties. He wasn't involved in any of it. It's not like he was doing his job and came upon some sort of illicit conduct or wrongdoing in the course of performing his official duties. None of that happened. Listening to gossip around the water cooler is not part of any employee's official duties. All of this is rumor, innuendo, and hearsay that filters into this CIA officer's mind, and he uses his imagination and conjecture to come up with the entire whistleblower complaint. Furthermore, the president did not, quote, solicit interference in the 2020 U.S. election, end quote. The only election that was discussed on that call between the two presidents was the 2016 election, in which there are credible allegations that Ukrainians assisted the Clinton campaign by leaking damaging financial records of Trump's then campaign manager, Paul Manafort. Now, also during the call, Trump requested assistance getting to the bottom of what happened with the Democratic National Committee's server that was allegedly hacked by the Russians. The server, by the way, was never directly examined by the FBI or Special Counsel Bob Mueller, despite repeated requests by and from the FBI and Special Counsel Bob Mueller to the DNC to access the server so that U.S. law enforcement could examine the actual evidence. They were rebuffed every single time by the Democratic National Committee. So in this case, we have Bob Mueller, the patron saint of the Democratic Party, and those wishing for Trump's impeachment, requesting multiple times, and the FBI prior to Mueller requesting multiple times. James Comey testified to this before Congress, to the DNC, hey, let us examine the server. Let us do our job. DNC says no. And that is what the president is concerned about, who, by the way, President Trump, by the way, is the head of the Department of Justice, is the head of the FBI, and he's concerned, obviously, that his agency didn't get the evidence that it wanted to determine who actually hacked into the DNC servers. So this is a part of President Trump's carrying out his law enforcement duties. Now, remember, the server, the DNC server that was allegedly hacked by the Russians was never examined directly by U.S. law enforcement, and yet this hacking formed one of the bases of Democrats' Russian collusion hoax. Now, reading on into the whistleblower complaint, just to the second sentence, I've only read the first sentence to you. The second sentence is also false. It states, quote, this interference includes, among other things, pressuring a foreign country to investigate one of the president's main domestic political rivals, end quote. But remember, the Ukrainian president and the Ukrainian foreign minister both said there was no pressure. So here we have the whistleblower who has no direct evidence of anything, was not involved in the telephone call, didn't hear it, wasn't involved in transcribing it. The whistleblower says Trump pressured Zelensky. Zelensky, the Trump the pressurer and Zelensky the alleged pressuree, Zelensky says, no, I was not pressured. So that's the end of the matter. I mean, this complaint should have been ripped up and put in the garbage can as soon as Zelensky says, no, I wasn't pressured. But yet we have the whistleblower complaint. We have it moving forward into the U.S. Congress. We have the impeachment inquiry as a result of it. Now, during that call, President Trump asked Ukraine to assist in investigating credible allegations of corruption involving the Biden family. But that's not called election interference. The whistleblower says it is. He writes it in his complaint, election interference. But that's not election interference. That's called law enforcement. It's the president's constitutional duty to ensure that the laws are faithfully executed. And there is credible evidence that Joe Biden violated U.S. law. Now, Joe Biden does not get a get-out-of-jail-free card because he is a political opponent of the president. If that were the case, then no U.S. president, no Department of Justice in any administration could investigate alleged wrongdoing by the political opponent of the incumbent president, because it would be construed as election interference, and thus the president could be impeached. That is obviously absurd. That's not the way the U.S. That's not the way the United States Justice Department works. That's not the way U.S. law works. But that's the way the whistleblower wants you to think the law works. No, the president is the head of the Justice Department. In fact, if you read the Constitution, there is no Justice Department in the Constitution. There's no Attorney General. There's no FBI. There's just the president. He's the executive officer, the chief executive officer of the executive branch. It's his job to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. He's doing his job. Now, apparently, the whistleblower was unaware that the United States Department of Justice has been investigating the origins of the Russian hoax and has been working with Ukrainians, with whom we have a criminal investigation mutual assistance treaty, by the way, which is not reported by the mainstream media. We have a treaty in place between the United States and Ukraine where we pledge mutual cooperation and assistance in carrying out law enforcement investigations. Keep that in mind when we come back from this brief commercial break. You're listening to the Mark Scaringi Show.
Now more of Mark Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. Here we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day, and perhaps there's none more important than the whistleblower complaint and the official impeachment inquiry having been declared by Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi that's going on right now. Well, actually, the House is on vacation during this week and I think the next week. So it was such an urgent concern that Speaker Pelosi announced the initiation of an official impeachment inquiry and then went on vacation. But nevertheless, we're here. The Mark Scaringi Show never goes on vacation. Well, when we do go on vacation, we take the show with us. That's right, Art, and we broadcast from various vacation destinations.
That's true.
Including the Great Smoky Mountains. So anyway, we're talking about the whistleblower complaint itself. We're kind of breaking it down. I've just read the first two lines. They both include multiple false statements in just the first two sentences of the whistleblower complaint. But then we're talking about something that is apparent. It's apparent this whistleblower was unaware that the Justice Department had been investigating the origins of the Russian hoax and had been working with the Ukrainians and other foreign nationals and governments. And we talked about the mutual assistance and criminal investigation treaty we have with Ukraine. I guess our friends in the Democratic Party want us to abrogate that treaty and not cooperate with Ukrainians on investigations into corruption. In any event, the United States Attorney General Bill Barr, he made several trips to Europe to work with foreign officials on this very law enforcement matter, on this very same investigation into the origins of the Russian hoax. Now, media reports indicate that Barr even asked President Trump to make introductory calls to foreign leaders requesting their assistance in this investigation. Perhaps this was one of those calls, the call from Trump to Zelensky. I'm sure we'll find out later. But the point of all of this is none of these facts about the fact that the Department of Justice is investigating the origins of the Russian hoax, that our United States Attorney General, the Department of Justice, is working with foreign nationals, foreign governments on this law enforcement investigation. None of those facts made it into the whistleblower complaint. Now, the whistleblower in his complaint, he recites interviews by Rudy Giuliani on Fox News. He cites tweets by Rudy Giuliani. Yet he can't cite the fact that Bill Barr had announced on the news that he was investigating the origins of the Russian hoax. That doesn't make it into the whistleblower complaint. Now, we'll continue on reading through the whistleblower complaint. And you can Google it, and you can pull it up for yourself, and you can track along with what we're doing here this afternoon. The whistleblower also writes, quote, "I was not a direct witness to most of the events described." Well, that's quite obvious. In fact, the whistleblower was not a direct witness to any of the events described. Again, unless you count watching Rudy Giuliani's appearances on Fox News or reading Giuliani's tweets, this is another false statement. And this is a false statement He says, I was not a direct witness to most of the events described. Well, partially false. In fact, he was not a direct witness to anything that was described. And that's what makes the statement false. The false statement is compounded by the whistleblower falsely stating in the complaint that he had direct evidence. He checked the box that he had direct evidence. He also checked the other box that he didn't have direct evidence, that he had indirect evidence. But he checked the box that he had direct evidence. Direct evidence of what? Where is his direct evidence? Again, watching Rudy Giuliani on Fox News, reading a Giuliani tweet, that's not direct evidence of crimes, criminal conduct, wrongdoing, abuse of power, etc. All the whistleblower has is hearsay, which is by its very definition not credible and inadmissible in court. That's why we have the rule against hearsay that we learn in first-year law school when we take our evidence course. We learn about hearsay. Now, this whistleblower complaint is so full of hearsay, it wouldn't even be admissible in a summary traffic case. Yet apparently it's going to form the basis of an impeachment of a sitting United States president. How does that go over with you, my dear listeners? It shouldn't go over very well. Now, most importantly, the complaint reveals the whistleblower, well, he's not a whistleblower at all. To qualify under the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act, the event described in the complaint must be, quote, a serious or flagrant problem, abuse, violation of law or executive order, or deficiency relating to the funding, administration, or operation of an intelligence activity within the responsibility and authority of the Director of National Intelligence involving classified information. Yet nothing alleged in the complaint satisfies that definition. What? I mean, read the complaint. What in that complaint is about the the operation of an intelligence activity? President Trump taking a telephone call and talking to President Zelensky, in which most of the call is the two men exchanging mutual accolades and how they love each other and how wonderful each other is. Zelensky views Trump as a mentor and as a leader in the fight against corruption. I mean, there was a real bromance that was developing there. It was quite touching, actually, Art. It was a little too lovey-dovey for me and you, probably. We don't talk that way, do we? No. All right. But that's the way President Trump talks, and it was very funny that United States Senator Lindsey Graham apparently called the president and said, "I've never heard you speak so beautifully and so nicely to anybody else. You know, why don't you speak nicely like that to me?" Senator Graham says. But that's what the call was. Is that intelligence gathering? No. It's a simple congratulatory call between two foreign leaders. It has nothing to do with any intelligence activity. And it's not under the responsibility and authority of the Director of National Intelligence. Was he involved in the call? No. Did he have anything to do with the call? No. So it's not an urgent concern. It doesn't satisfy the definition in the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act. Okay. Now, let's take it even one step further. The whistleblower himself violated the very statute he seeks protection under. How? Well, by communicating with House Democrats about his concerns about Trump before he even became a whistleblower. That's expressly prohibited by the statute. You can't do that. You can't speak to Congress before you file the whistleblower complaint. Yet this whistleblower, who we now learn is a Democrat, and we love our Democratic friends, and well, I'm not sure I really have any Democratic friends. We'll have to look into that. We'll do our own investigation here on the Mark Scaringi Show. Does Mark Scaringi have any Democratic friends? They're dropping like flies, I think Art is saying back there. So this particular Democrat, the media reports say he is a CIA officer. He chose to confer with the staff of Adam Schiff's House Intelligence Committee. Now, Adam Schiff is the man who is hell-bent on impeaching Trump. He's been saying that for years now. And by the way, his committee now just so happens to be the one leading the official impeachment inquiry. How about that? Ironic, do you think? Boy, that's quite an alignment of the stars there. And how many prior impeachments did an impeachment begin in the House Intelligence Committee? Probably none. They traditionally begin in the House Judiciary Committee. We'll talk more about the impeachment process in a little bit. But in any event, after receiving advice and direction from Schiff's staff, the whistleblower then goes and retains a highly partisan Democrat attorney to obviously help him draft this complaint. This complaint, in parts, reads like a legal brief. And here we are today. It's a travesty that things have come this far, and that something riddled with hearsay, opinion, and conjecture, and tainted with partisan politics from the very beginning, and then later completely debunked by the actual transcript of the telephone call. It's a travesty that this will serve as the instigation and basis for the impeachment of a sitting United States president. And the question is, will the American people stand for this? And I'm not a betting man, but I'll bet you they won't. And I think that's why Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, chose not to bring an actual official impeachment inquiry by writing a bill or writing a resolution setting forth the charges and introducing the bill into the House Judiciary Committee for an investigation. She chose not to do that. This is kind of like a half impeachment inquiry, a quasi impeachment inquiry. It's almost like Speaker Pelosi thinks she can get just a little bit pregnant here. But I think time will show, biologically, that's impossible. And politically, it's also going to be impossible for Nancy Pelosi. We'll talk more about this when we return from a brief commercial break. You're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show.
Let's get back to the Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first, and I should ad-lib that and say from the perspective of putting the Constitution first. And I think that you will reach the same conclusion that I have, that Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, she's kind of pushing the Constitution aside as she begins her official impeachment inquiry. Well, let's talk a little bit more about this, quote, official impeachment inquiry, end quote. Now, I explained in my recent column on Penn Live, and you can go on Penn Live and take a look at that column, or you can find it on the Mark Scaringi Show website. I explained in that column how this current official impeachment inquiry is, in fact, not an official impeachment inquiry. Yeah, last week, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi did take to the podium, and she did announce in her kind of stuttering, mumbling, denture-challenged way, she said this, quote, "Therefore, today, I'm announcing the House of Representatives is moving forward with an official impeachment inquiry," end quote. Now, was she standing on the floor of the House when she made that declaration? No. She was holding a press conference, which is where she does, I guess, most of her, quote, legislative, end quote, work. Now, in her very next sentence, she declared, so when I heard her say that the House is moving forward with an official impeachment inquiry, I thought, wow, she's going to introduce a bill or a resolution laying out the charges and calling for the House to conduct an investigation into these high crimes and misdemeanors. I was really waiting for something big. Well, in the very next sentence, she said, well, I'm directing our 6 committees to proceed with investigations under the umbrella of impeachment inquiry, end quote. What is an umbrella of impeachment inquiry, Art?
Who knows?
Who knows? That's right. Have you ever heard of this thing, an umbrella of impeachment inquiry? You can flip through your Constitution, and you're not going to find the word umbrella anywhere in the Constitution. But that's it. That's what we've got going on with the entire nation watching. Pelosi stepped up to the television cameras and boldly announced that, well, her House committee should just continue doing what they're doing. But what they are doing is not impeachment. They're merely continuing their oversight. And that is even a stretch itself. The Constitution, importantly, does not empower the Congress to conduct oversight of the executive branch. It does not expressly empower the Congress to conduct oversight. If you look at Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution, it states, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House. And so I'll emphasize, it states all legislative powers. Now, that does not include criminal investigatory powers. The Constitution gives the president the authority to conduct criminal investigations, not the Congress. The congressional power to investigate, for example, the power to compel the production of papers and things through subpoenas, the power to interrogate witnesses under oath, that is an implied power, not an express power. It's implied and derived from the legislative power. So the power to investigate must emanate from a legislative purpose. So there needs to be a legislative purpose behind each of these committees and what they're doing with regard to, quote, oversight. The United States Supreme Court has held that the power of investigation may properly be employed only, quote, in aid of the legislative function, end quote. Is Adam Schiff's House Intelligence Committee legislating as it investigates the Trump-Ukraine matter? No, it's not. It's conducting, in truth, what it's doing is it's conducting a quasi-criminal investigation of the president. Remember, Speaker Pelosi announced an official impeachment inquiry. In order to impeach, you must have a high crime or misdemeanor or treason or bribery. So if Schiff and the other 5 committees are conducting an official impeachment inquiry, as they are according to Speaker Pelosi, they must be searching for treason, bribery, or high crimes or misdemeanors. So they're conducting a quasi-criminal investigation into the president. But the Congress does not have the constitutional authority to conduct criminal investigations. So that's why I've argued in my columns and on this show that what Speaker Pelosi declared and what Adam Schiff is doing with his House Intelligence Committee is really a fraud. It's fake. They don't have the constitutional authority to do what they're doing. All right, now, what about the impeachment power? Yes, the Congress does have the impeachment power. We all know the Constitution states the president and vice president and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. That's Article 2, Section 4. Now, the Constitution does not specify how impeachment proceedings are to be initiated, but it does state the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment. That's Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5. And I'll restate, I'll emphasize, it states the House of Representatives has the sole power of impeachment. The House, not the Speaker of the House, not just Speaker Pelosi. The House has the power. And the House works by introducing and passing bills and resolutions, calling for things such as impeachment. Has such a bill or resolution been introduced, let alone passed? No. And further, the House is constitutionally obligated to base a bill of impeachment on the standards set out in Article 2. Those are the standards we just read in Article 2, Section 4. treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. So what House Democrats should have done is they should have introduced a bill or resolution calling for the impeachment of the president and listing the charges set forth in Article 2, Section 4. List the charges. What are the high crimes and misdemeanors for which you are investigating to possibly impeach the president? They don't know. They haven't listed anything. And that's another reason why this whole thing is a hoax. You know, they should have to, I think the Constitution requires that they introduce a bill or a resolution, they list those charges, what are the high crimes and misdemeanors. So that's how the president will know what he's being charged with. He'll then know how to defend himself. You know, let's analogize into the criminal law. The prosecutors are required to present what's called an information or an indictment. And they even initiate most criminal proceedings in Pennsylvania by filing criminal complaints. And in the criminal complaint, they list the charges. They list the crimes that they have probable cause to believe that you have committed. Now, none of my listeners of the Mark Scaringi Show are going to have any experience with being on the receiving end of a criminal complaint and an indictment or an information, but some of my clients, on the other hand, they have, so they have a little experience with this art. And you as the defense attorney, you don't know what to say or do. You don't know how to defend your client until you see the criminal complaint. And when I used to do a lot of criminal defense work myself, I would have clients come in to the conference room, and they would tell their story, and I would listen to their story. But really, what I wanted was show me the complaint. Let me see the charging document. I need to know what crimes they allege you committed before we can start anything in defending you. And that's why this impeachment inquiry hoax is so unfair to the President of the United States. You have 6 committees in Congress. Thankfully, they're on vacation, but they're coming back, and they are trying to impeach this president, and he doesn't even know what the charges are. That is grossly unfair. If you are charged in a criminal case, you have the right to know what those charges are. You have the right to a formal arraignment where the prosecutor has to say, hey, judge, and with you standing there, these are the charges. These are the crimes I believe Joe Blow violated. The president has been denied even basic constitutional rights in this official impeachment inquiry hoax. So the Democrats under Speaker Pelosi, in my view, are violating the Constitution. They are abrogating longstanding tradition about how impeachment bills, about how impeachment inquiries are started and how they proceed. And she's doing so in order to throw as much dirt on this president as she can without giving him the official legal ability to defend himself in Congress. We'll talk more about this official impeachment inquiry hoax when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show.
Now back to The Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to The Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America and now the United States Constitution first. And we're talking about the official impeachment inquiry hoax. Earlier in the program, we talked about the fake whistleblower complaint, and now we're zeroing in on Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi and the charade that she has unfolding in Washington, D.C. today. And I apologize that we're getting so much into the weeds on constitutional law and such, but it is critically important to understand what is happening to our duly elected President of the United States. He's essentially being framed by House Democrats and, of course, the media, their public relations director, in a fake impeachment process that has not been brought in the same way past impeachment processes have been brought. And as a result, it's essentially denying him the right and ability to defend himself in Congress from charges he knows not what of. What are these charges? No one knows. Ask Nancy Pelosi. Nancy, you've declared an impeachment inquiry. What are the charges? That's basic. That's where you start. That's number one. What are the charges? She doesn't know. No one knows. No one knows. Now, Art Selby knows. He's declared that we know what the charge is, and the charge is Donald Trump won the election. And Democrats are going to view that as a crime and hold that against him and try to throw him out of office for that. And I think there is a lot of truth to what Mr. Selby, his opinion on the matter. But let's talk a little bit further about the House impeachment process. And it takes three phases. One, there's an initiation of the impeachment process. And historically, that's done by a bill or a resolution. And then the Judiciary Committee investigation then commences. You have hearings, and you have the marking up process of the articles of impeachment. And then you have the full House consideration of the articles of impeachment. But again, we have no articles of impeachment yet. Has any of that happened? No. In the case of Presidents Bill Clinton and Richard Nixon, the Judiciary Committee reported resolutions officially authorizing an impeachment investigation into those particular presidents' activities. Again, that has not happened here. The second part of the House impeachment process, now that usually resides in the Judiciary Committee, which can empower subcommittees and hold public hearings, subpoena persons and records, and it can incur expenses as part of the investigation. And historically, they've always involved the majority and the minority. The chairman and the ranking member have always had joint subpoena power, for example, where both Democrats and Republicans are involved in conducting the investigation. In this case, it's been only Democrats. The Republicans have just kind of been left to just kind of shout out during the one hearing that we saw that was public involving the acting director of DNI. The Republicans are just left to comment on what's happening in front of them. Now, at the end of the investigation, the House Judiciary Committee then typically would decide if the evidence merits moving forward with the drafting of impeachment articles for the full House to consider. And that's historically how the impeachment process has been initiated and has unfolded. And by the way, we're not even in the Judiciary Committee. Apparently, this impeachment inquiry is being presided over by Adam Schiff of the House Intelligence Committee. And again, Adam Schiff's, his staff was involved in conferring with the alleged whistleblower that started this whole thing before the whistleblower was even a whistleblower. And we've only had one public hearing. As I said, that's the one involving the acting director of DNI. The examination of the former envoy to Ukraine, which occurred just a day or two ago, that occurred behind closed doors. So who knows what was actually testified to? Where are the American people in all of this? We don't know what's going on. That examination of the envoy to Ukraine, that should have been public. The American people need to be a part of this. If House Democrats want to take away our president, who was elected by a majority vote in the Electoral College, then shouldn't the American people be involved in this? You know, the Democrats are using several standing committees: Intelligence, Judiciary, Foreign Affairs, Oversight, Reform, Financial Services, and Ways and Means to conduct this fake impeachment inquiry. You know, but really, in essence, what they're really just doing is they're conducting oversight functions because no impeachment bill has been introduced. Now, the standing committees do have subpoena power, and what's fascinating to me is that they're not using it. For example, they did not subpoena documents from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and Pompeo sent that heated tweet in response that the House Democrats are bullying members of the Department of State. But why didn't those committees subpoena documents and things, records from the Department of State? They didn't. They simply sent a demand letter. again, that's one of the reasons why Pompeo is so ticked off by this request. Had they sent Pompeo a subpoena, then the Secretary of State could have gone into court on a motion to quash the subpoena on grounds there's no legislative basis for the request. Remember, there's no bill or resolution on impeachment. We're still in oversight. And in order for committees to conduct oversight, it has to emanate from a legislative purpose. There's no legislative purpose here. So had the committee sent a subpoena to the Secretary of State, he would have, again, filed that motion to quash, and he would have argued that legal point in court. So, and by the way, in their letter to Secretary Pompeo, the Democratic Committee chairman, they conclude by writing, any failure by Pompeo to comply, quote, shall constitute evidence of obstruction of the House's impeachment inquiry, end quote. Again, what impeachment inquiry? The Democratic Committee chairman write the House impeachment inquiry, but there is none. And the House is not acting here. Only these committees are acting. They say the House impeachment inquiry. No. The House of Representatives has not voted to impeach or to begin an investigation or inquiry. Only Nancy Pelosi spoke it into existence, and then these House committees took it up. If Congress, by the way, sends you a letter asking for documents, you can say, go to hell. If they send a subpoena, that's another matter. And another thing, Congress cannot outsource impeachment. You know, they tried with the appointment of Special Counsel Bob Mueller. They tried to get him to do their dirty work. He came up short, and so they came up short. Now they're trying to do it themselves, but by ignoring longstanding rules and traditions for how to bring an impeachment inquiry, and they're depriving the president of the right and the ability to defend himself. But thankfully, we have a president who has the almost unnatural ability to defend himself. The president has been on the attack, and rightly so, defending himself against this fake impeachment inquiry and actually going on the offensive against House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff for the obvious taint, the impropriety that occurred when Schiff's staff conferred with the whistleblower before he became a whistleblower. Trump is the most effective advocate for himself that I've witnessed. Where are the Republicans? Where are the Republicans in the Senate? I mean, it's remarkable that they're just kind of standing around watching the House Democrats abuse the Constitution, abuse the powers of Congress to try to take down a president. And it's like the only one defending the president is the president. He's a pretty tough guy, and he does a pretty effective job. But I don't know about you, but where's everyone else? Where now? We have Republicans in the House, the Republican minority leader in the House. He's doing a pretty effective job explaining this is a bogus impeachment inquiry, and he sent a letter to Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi demanding that she give House Republicans rights, give them the right to subpoena, the right to call their own witnesses, the right to know what the charges are, the right to defend the president. So you've got to give him some credit. But boy, the Republicans in the Senate are very quiet, and it's almost as if this president is doing battle by himself. And the president is finally starting to frame the defense correctly. If you read his very recent tweet, he wrote, "As president, I have an obligation to end corruption, even if that means requesting the help of a foreign country or countries." And that's the way the president and Republicans should defend this president, that he has the constitutional obligation to enforce the laws of the United States, and that includes investigating and prosecuting corruption wherever it occurs in the United States, in China, and in Ukraine. So finally we have the president defending himself. The president's on the attack, and hopefully he'll be able to defeat this fake impeachment inquiry that we see coming out of Washington, D.C. today. Well, that's about all the time we have today for the Mark Scaringi Show. Thanks for listening.